I need you to stay with me for the next few minutes, because what I'm about to tell you is the kind of story that changes the way you see the people closest to you. I walked into my house on an ordinary Tuesday evening, smelling the familiar scent of cinnamon air freshener and hearing the faint hum of the dishwasher. Nothing felt different, but by the time I went to bed that night, everything I thought I knew about my family was gone. And what I found out next, most people can't even bring themselves to say out loud. Before we go deeper into this story, take a second and hit that subscribe button. Give this video a like, and let us know where you're watching from. I'm curious to know how far these stories travel. My name is David, and up until that Tuesday, I believed I was living the definitive version of the American dream in a quiet, tree-lined suburb just outside of Columbus, Ohio. I had a stable career as a senior structural engineer, a job that required absolute precision, where numbers never lied and blueprints always held true. My wife, Elena, was a high school English teacher, admired by her peers and adored by her students. Together, we had two beautiful children, 7-year-old Leo and 4-year-old Maya. They were my absolute world. Every late hour at the office, every weekend sacrifice, every calculated decision I made was to build an unshakable fortress for them. But looking back, the most terrifying thing about betrayal is how incredibly quiet it is before it hits you. That particular evening started like 1,000 others. Elena had taken Maya to a local gymnastics class, and Leo was at a friend's house down the street for a study group. I had arrived home early, planning to surprise the family with a takeout dinner from our favorite Italian bistro. The house was peaceful, bathed in the soft orange glow of the late afternoon sun filtering through the blinds. I set my briefcase down on the kitchen island and noticed Elena's old iPad sitting near the charging station. It was an ancient device, mostly used by the kids for streaming cartoons or by Elena for looking up recipes while cooking. As I passed it, the screen lit up with a notification banner. It wasn't a standard app alert or a reminder. It was an iMessage. Because the device was still linked to our old shared family cloud account, the preview text expanded right across the glass. The message came from a contact saved simply as M. Collins. The text read, "The hotel is booked for next weekend in Chicago. 5 years later, and I still can't get enough of you. Can't wait to hold my kid's mother away from the chaos." I stood entirely frozen in the center of our pristine kitchen, the breath trapped tightly in my throat. For a long moment, my brain flatly refused to process the words. I told myself it was a wrong number, a spam text, or perhaps a bizarre inside joke from one of Elena's colleagues at the high school. My kid's mother. The phrasing felt like a physical blow to my chest. My hands trembled as I reached out and picked up the tablet. The device didn't have a passcode locked onto it because the children used it so frequently. With a pounding heart, I tapped on the message thread. What I found inside wasn't just a brief, passing flirtation. It was a massive, meticulously organized archive of a parallel life. The conversation stretched back years. There were thousands of messages, shared calendar event invites, travel itineraries, and photos that I had never seen before. M. Collins was Marcus Collins, a prominent structural contractor whose firm had collaborated with the local school district on a massive campus expansion project half a decade ago. As I scrolled through the endless timeline of digital breadcrumbs, the timeline began to warp reality right before my eyes. The messages showed a horrifying level of calculation. They hadn't just met occasionally, they had structured their entire professional and personal schedules around each other. I saw text exchanges from the exact week Leo was born, 7 years ago. I saw photos of Marcus holding a newborn baby in a hospital room that looked remarkably like the maternity ward where Elena gave birth. Photos taken during hours when I was sent home by the nurses to get a few hours of sleep. My mind raced backward through time, desperately trying to find an anchor, a moment where Elena looked guilty or shifted her gaze. But there was nothing. She had been the perfect, supportive wife. She packed my lunches, asked about my engineering projects, and kissed me goodbye every morning with what seemed like genuine warmth. The sheer coldness of her duality was dizzying. I wasn't just looking at a cheating spouse. I was looking at a master architect of a completely fabricated reality. As I sat on the kitchen stool, drowning in the digital evidence, my engineering mind involuntarily took over. I needed data. I needed to know the full depth of the foundation before I let the structure collapse. I remembered a strange anomaly from 3 years prior. when Leo required a routine appendectomy at the Columbus Children's Hospital. During the pre-surgery intake, the medical team had run a standard blood panel. I distinctly remembered the doctor glancing at the charts and making a passing remark about Leo's blood type being O negative. At the time, I hadn't thought twice about it. I am AB positive. In the chaos of a childhood medical emergency, you don't calculate genetic inheritance charts. But now, sitting in the silence of my compromised home, the basic biology hit me like a high-speed train. An AB-positive father cannot biologically sire an O-negative child. It is genetically impossible. The room began to spin. If Leo wasn't mine, then what about Maya? Maya, my sweet little girl, who had my grandmother's distinct green eyes, or so everyone in the family always claimed. I realized with an absolute sickening certainty that I had been raising another man's legacy, poured my blood, sweat, and savings into a life built entirely on a foundation of sand. I needed definitive proof. I couldn't just rely on an old iPad and a half-remembered conversation with a pediatric surgeon. I closed the tablet, placed it exactly where I had found it, and wiped my fingerprints away with a kitchen towel. When Elena walked through the front door 20 minutes later, laughing with Maya on her hip, I forced my face into a practiced mask of calm. I smiled, kissed her cheek, and asked how gymnastics class went. Inside, I felt like a ghost walking through a house I no longer owned. The next morning, I began my covert investigation. I didn't confront her. An immediate confrontation would allow her to control the narrative, delete accounts, or call a lawyer before I had my defense prepared. Instead, I drove to a local pharmacy on my lunch break and purchased 2 discrete, high-accuracy home DNA paternity testing kits. The challenge was collecting the samples without raising suspicion. Over the next 48 hours, I became a spy in my own home. I waited until the dead of night, using a small flashlight to carefully harvest stray hairs from Leo's hairbrush and utilizing a clean cotton swab to collect saliva samples from Maya's favorite bedtime pacifier, which she had recently outgrown but kept on her nightstand. I sealed the vials, filled out the paperwork using a secure P.O. box I had hastily opened that morning, and shipped them off via overnight express delivery to the testing laboratory. The 6 days it took for the laboratory to process the genetic markers were the longest, most agonizing days of my entire life. Every single interaction with my family felt completely surreal. I would sit at the dinner table, watching Elena cut up chicken for Maya, listening to Leo talk about his elementary school soccer practice, and wonder if the entire world was about to explode. I looked closely at my children's faces. Now that the veil of blind trust had been violently stripped away, I began to see Marcus Collins in the subtle shape of Leo's jawline and the distinct curl of Maya's dark hair. I found myself pulled into a dark web of intense moral dilemma. I loved these children with every fiber of my being. I had stayed up with them through fevers, taught Leo how to ride a bicycle, and held Maya when she was terrified of thunderstorms. Did the absence of a genetic link instantly erase 7 years of profound fatherhood? Before we continue, take a second and share your thoughts so far on this story below. I read every single one. On Monday afternoon, while sitting in a tense corporate project meeting at my engineering firm, a silent notification popped up on my personal email account. The sender was the private genetic diagnostics laboratory. My hands grew icy cold against the surface of the conference table. I excused myself from the room, walking down the long carpeted hallway into the empty restroom at the end of the hall. I opened the attached PDF files. The executive summary for both documents used cold, sterile, undeniable mathematical language. The alleged father is excluded as the biological father of the tested child. The probability of paternity is 0%. For both Leo and Maya, neither of them belong to me. The 5-year affair mentioned in the text messages wasn't the beginning. It was merely a continuation of a deception that had started before our son was even conceived. My entire adult life had been an elaborate, carefully staged piece of theater. I didn't cry. The sheer magnitude of the betrayal seemed to freeze my emotional receptors, leaving only a cold, calculating resolve in its wake. As an engineer, when a structure is fundamentally compromised beyond repair, you don't attempt to patch the drywall. You prepare for a controlled demolition to protect whatever assets remain. I immediately drove to the office of a high-end, aggressive family law attorney named Arthur Vance. who specialized in complex, high-net-worth divorce cases. I laid out the digital transcripts, the medical history, and the certified DNA results on his mahogany desk. Vance looked up at me through his glasses, his expression a mix of professional intrigue and genuine pity. He told me that Ohio law was complex regarding paternity acknowledgement, but given the deliberate, long-term fraudulent concealment, we had a powerful framework to launch an absolute legal counteroffensive. Vance's primary advice was swift: secure the capital before revealing your hand. Over the next week, under his precise guidance, I began systematically protecting my financial assets. I quietly opened separate bank accounts at an entirely different financial institution. I audited our joint accounts, tracking where our shared money had been funneled. I discovered that Elena had been routinely transferring small, unnoticeable increments of money into a private savings account for years, money she presumably intended to use for her secret life with Marcus. I also discovered invoices for high-end boutique hotels, expensive lingerie, and weekend spa retreats billed as educational conferences. She was funding her romance using the very income I earned during my exhausting 60-hour work weeks. I continued to play the role of the oblivious, doting husband for one final weekend. It was the most challenging engineering project I had ever executed, maintaining a perfectly calm exterior while my internal world was completely scorched. We attended a neighborhood backyard barbecue together. I watched Elena chat amiably with our neighbors, laughing, handing out paper plates, and playing the part of the dedicated suburban matriarch. I saw how easily the lies poured out of her mouth when someone asked about her upcoming weekend curriculum seminar in Chicago. She lied with an ease that could only be described as sociopathic. I looked at Marcus Collins, who was also present at the neighborhood gathering, with his own unsuspecting wife, offering me a beer and congratulating me on my recent corporate promotion. The sheer audacity of their shared secret was breathtaking. The following Tuesday, exactly 2 weeks after I first found the messages on the old iPad, the legal paperwork was fully finalized and processed by the county courthouse. I had arranged for Elena to be formally served with divorce papers and a fraud lawsuit at her high school campus, precisely at 3:15 p.m., just as the final bell rang and the students were dismissing. I wanted her to experience the sudden, public collapse of her carefully constructed reputation in an environment where she felt completely secure. Meanwhile, I took a half-day off from my engineering office. I hired a professional moving crew, packing up every single piece of furniture, clothing, and personal property that belonged exclusively to me, leaving only her belongings and the bare structural walls of our suburban home. By 5 p.m., I was sitting alone in a single lawn chair in the middle of our completely empty living room. The echo inside the house was deafening. The front door flew open, and Elena stormed in, her face flushed with a mixture of intense rage and absolute panic. She held the thick stack of legal documents in her shaking right hand. "What is the meaning of this, David?" she screamed, her voice cracking against the bare walls. "Have you completely lost your mind, suing me for fraud, demanding full asset division, and denying paternity?" I didn't stand up. I simply looked at her, my expression completely flat. I reached into my jacket pocket, pulled out the printed color copies of her iMessage history and the certified DNA lab reports, and gently dropped them onto the hardwood floor between us. She looked down at the papers, and in an instant, the fiery rage completely vanished from her eyes. It was replaced by a hollow, terrifying blankness. The mask she had worn so effortlessly for over 7 years finally cracked and fell away. She didn't try to deny it. She didn't offer a desperate excuse. She simply dropped to her knees, staring at the genetic percentages printed on the laboratory sheets. "How long have you known?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. I stood up from my chair, looking down at the woman I had loved unconditionally for a decade. "I knew enough to look under the foundation, Elena, and I found out that nothing here was ever real." The legal battle that followed was fierce and clinical. Because of the overwhelming, undeniable evidence of systemic paternity fraud and financial malfeasance, the court ruled heavily in my favor regarding property distribution. The suburban house was ordered sold, and the proceeds were heavily tilted to compensate for the years of marital assets she had covertly redirected. Marcus Collins' life similarly imploded. When the legal filings became part of the public court record, his wife immediately filed for a high-profile divorce, stripping him of his share in the contracting firm. But the victory felt incredibly hollow. The hardest part wasn't the loss of the money or the house. It was the final, agonizing severance from Leo and Maya. Legally, I was absolved of future obligations, but emotionally, the scars of those children calling me daddy for 7 years will remain with me until the day I die. They were completely innocent victims in a war engineered by their own mother. It has been several months since the final divorce decree was stamped by the judge. I moved into a modern, quiet apartment in downtown Columbus, closer to my structural engineering firm. The silence of my new home is no longer heavy. It has become a space of healing, reflection, and rebuilding. I am slowly learning to trust my own senses again, piecing together my identity outside of the elaborate lie I inhabited for nearly a decade. When you build a structure on a completely broken foundation, the collapse is inevitable, but the clearance allows you to finally build something genuine on solid ground. Before we go deeper, I would love to hear your point of view. Tell me what part hit you the hardest in my story, and share your thoughts in the comments. Thank you so much for staying with us through this incredibly emotional journey on family secrets and revenge. If this story moved you, touched your heart, or made you reflect on the ultimate value of truth and loyalty, please take a brief moment to like this video, leave your insightful comments below, and subscribe to our channel for more deep, cinematic narratives. Your incredible support helps our community grow and ensures these vital stories of justice and truth continue to be told. Shared thoughts connect us all. See you in the next story.